get up this early to listen to a politician. What a miraculous. I heard the little sweetheart back there laughing. And let's see, it looks like a lot of high school students here. Is that all the back row here? Yeah, high school seniors, is that it? Yeah, congratulations. Appreciate you being here as well. I have to tell you, I was younger than you when I first experienced Iowa in a serious way, and that was looking out the window and judging something about the land. I was 15 years old when I went off to work at my uncle's ranch. He had a pretty tough ranch out in Idaho. I say tough because the ground was sort of sandy, and to irrigate the corn, or to water the corn, you couldn't wait for the rain from the sky. You had to get some water from the irrigation ditch and run it down the rows between the corn, and of course you're always cultivating, putting dirt back over those stabilizer roots on the corn to keep it from falling over, and it was tough raising corn in Idaho. And after a summer of doing that, I got on the train to come home, and the train took me through Iowa. I looked out the window and I saw that the dirt, instead of being sandy colored, was black, and I saw that the corn grew tall and dark green, and the water came from the sky instead of the ditch, and I said, God must love Iowa. And I think that's probably true. I had the fun. I came to work in Iowa, actually, after I got going in my business. I started working in a consulting firm, and one of my clients was in Marshalltown, Iowa, other side of the state, and I worked at a company called Fisher Controls. I met a guy named Larry Solly, who was my boss there, and Larry said, if you think the land in Iowa is loved by God, you can't believe the people here. You're going to come to love the people too, and I have over the years. This is a great state with great people. It reminds you that what makes America the most powerful nation on earth is not just our land and our rivers and our trees. It is the heart and the nature of the American people. Someone wrote some time ago, looking at what makes great nations and great civilizations and what makes them come and what makes them go, and concluded that the greatness of a nation is associated with the culture of the people, the things they believe. That makes a great nation or a weak nation. And the American culture is a culture of hard work, education, sacrifice for our families. We're a family-oriented society. American culture is also associated with respect for God or for something greater than in our life than ourselves. We love our country. Americans respect this land. If you notice that when the Olympics are held, I got the chance, as you may know, to run the Olympics in Salt Lake City in 2002. When the Olympics are held, they give at the end of an event, they give the gold medal to the winner, and they stand on a podium with the silver medalist a step lower, the bronze medalist one step lower, and the person that gets the gold medal, they put the gold around their neck, and then they play their national anthem and raise their flag while they're playing the anthem. And you may notice that when the kids of other countries get their national anthem played, they're typically going, we're number one, or high-fiving each other. And of course, they're excited. But the young people from our nation typically put their hand on their heart. And you generally see them singing the words of the national anthem. And sometimes they get it right. And it's a remarkable thing about the American spirit. And it is that spirit and those cultural values that make us such a strong nation. Now, we face some extraordinary challenges right now. You may recognize that. I don't know that the young people recognize just how unusual the world is right now. America's faced extraordinary challenges in the past. These last world wars are just amazing to contemplate. The sacrifice of the American people. Americans rose to the occasion to protect our country and to protect the world in some respects. But we face today some other major challenges which are unprecedented in their nature. Never have we faced anything quite like this before. And Americans are going to be called upon again to rise to the occasion to be able to deal with the challenges. I think we're going to change course as a nation. There have been times when we've changed course before. I had a friend who's a professor, was a professor rather. He said to me, what do you think were the great inflection points in American history? It sounded to me like a final exam question. What were the great inflection points in American history? And I said, what do you mean inflection points? I don't understand what you mean. And he said, well, if you look back over the history of America, you'll find that there have been times when everything seems to change at once. When the culture of the people changes, when the military tactics change, when the way business is conducted changes, when all these things happen at once. And he began referring to, for instance, the change from the 1800s to the 1900s. when we began having industrial products and factories, and cities started to grow, and culture changed as a result of those things. And he said the revolutionary times were certainly those kind of times when we threw off Great Britain. And we changed the relationship between the citizen and the state. With the Declaration of Independence, we broke new ground. We said that instead of the state being sovereign and the citizen being the servant, we flipped it. We said that God gave to the individual certain inalienable rights, and that made the individual the sovereign in our society. And the state became the servant. And that, as the poet said, has made all the difference. We became a land of opportunity and freedom, and we took off as a nation. Welcome people here from other lands that wanted to come for opportunity and pull their own weight, and built the most powerful nation in the history of the earth. I think we're going through one of those inflection points right now, that America is changing course. And I think we're changing course, or we will change course, because of the extraordinary challenges that face us. One, we are under attack from jihadists, this global movement of some Muslims to bring down all modernity within their own world and within ours. That's an unusual threat, unlike anything we've faced before. Number two, we're facing an enormous challenge from the emergence of Asia out of poverty. China getting rich. India, as they come into the world marketplace, it's going to be different. And then, of course, there are our own domestic challenges. We're spending too much money in Washington. We're using too much foreign oil. Our immigration laws aren't being followed. We see schools that are falling behind our international standards. And healthcare leaves a lot of people behind. We got domestic challenges, competitive challenges from China and India, and we have foreign policy challenges coming from, among other places, the jihadist movement. And so I think America's going to change course. And the question is, which course are we going to take? I think Hillary Clinton represents a sharp turn to the left. That's not where I want to go. I think she takes her, yeah. I think she's inspired by the Europe of old. Big government, big taxes, big brother, that's the way to go. That has not worked for Europe. It wouldn't work here. Europeans are turning towards our approach and becoming more like us. No, I think the right approach is to cling to the principles of conservatism in the Republican Party. If someone asked you, what does the Republican Party stand for? One word. Well, that's tough, isn't it? Values, you might say. Freedom. It's probably the best choice of word. Freedom. I think the word I'm going to light on today is strength. I believe that a strong America is the best ally peace has ever known. If you want to see a peaceful world, you want to see a strong America. If you want to see a prosperous world, you want to see a strong America. And so my campaign is about changing Washington in such a way that we can strengthen America. And by that I mean strengthening our military to protect us, strengthening our economy to provide good jobs and the resources we need, and strengthening our homes and our families. Now, I go all over the country talking about strengthening our military. Here's what I do. I'd add 100,000 troops to our active duty personnel, and more funding for the equipment and the armament they have to make sure they can be successful on the battlefield, and so that when they come home they can get the care they deserve. I'd like to strengthen our economy, not by raising taxes. Senator Clinton wants to raise taxes for Social Security. She wants to raise taxes on individuals. She wants to raise taxes on corporations. She wants to raise the death tax. That's the wrong direction. I want to kill the death tax once and for all. I want to get taxes down in our country so people can invest in the future. By the way, I have a special savings plan. I don't think it's fair for people to get taxed when they earn their money, taxed when they save their money, and taxed when they die. So I'm stopping the death tax, and then I have a plan for savings. And my view is this: if you're making $200,000 a year and less, anybody making more than that in this room? No, I'm just kidding. Well, I'll come running to you for checks afterwards. No, if you're making $200,000 a year or less, the new tax rate on your interest, dividends, and capital gains would be absolutely zero. I want people of middle incomes to be able to save their money. And I was... Yeah. describing this in Nevada, by the way, and someone said, well, you know, John Edwards has a savings plan where you can save $250 a year tax-free. And I said, whoop-de-doo. And I said, that won't buy you a retirement, won't buy an education, won't buy a house. And Bill Dio, he's the father of Representative Dio, he was in the audience. He says, it won't buy him a haircut either. So I want to help people save their money. And finally, I want to not only strengthen our military and strengthen our economy, I want to strengthen our families. I want to strengthen families. And there are a lot of ways to do that. One, I want to teach our kids that before they have babies, they should get married. That marriage comes first. I want to realign some of our programs. You realize that if a single young woman who happens to have a child, if she decides to marry, it's going to cost her thousands of dollars every year. You think, well, why is that? And it's not just the tax penalty. No, I'm talking about somebody of very modest means. It's that they lose benefits. They might lose some Medicaid, housing vouchers, and so forth because the income of their spouse is now attributed to them. It doesn't make sense, in my view, that the husband or the father should have responsibility for the child whether or not he's gotten married, and that we should insist fathers have responsibility. And then, you know, some time ago, a leader named David Dobson, you may know Dr. James Dobson, I call him David, Dr. James Dobson, he's had something called Focus on the Family. He met with Ronald Reagan a number of years ago, and he said, you know, we need to look at all the programs that come out of Washington to make sure that they're family friendly. And so he and Ronald Reagan came up with the idea of a family impact statement. Anytime Congress was going to write something, or there was a policy that affected the family, they were going to do a family impact statement to see if it hurt families or helped families. And so they put that in an executive order, and it was issued. And then in the dead of night, I presume, Bill Clinton took that away, just made it go away. Well, I'm going to bring it back again and make sure that we understand what programs are doing that affect families. And you know, did you hear that story about the Maine school district? You know, you hear these stories about school districts doing extraordinary things. In my state, a school district said that a parent was not allowed to take their second grader out of a class where they were teaching them about same-sex marriage. A second grader. We need to look at the rights of families and parents and make sure that parents have the kind of ability that they need to guide their children. Well, I want to strengthen families, and I want to strengthen our economy, and I want to strengthen our military. My campaign is about changing Washington, finally, to strengthen those things. And I believe change begins with us. And you should know I'm optimistic. I think America's future is brighter than our past. You guys in the back row there, you're going to have fabulous days, but only if we take the right course at this stage. Only if we make the kind of commitment to the principles that have made this nation great. It is not inevitable that we're always the leader of the world. It's just essential. And so I want to thank you for your willingness to come together and spend a little time with me. I'm going to turn to you for your questions. My experience is Iowans always have plenty of questions. And I appreciate the chance to be with you. It's a great land. We're the hope of the earth, and we're going to keep it that way. Thank you so much. Now, let's see. Yes, ma'am.
I think you're a supporter of renewable fuels, and ethanol is very important to our Iowa economy. What would you do to support our ethanol industry?
Yeah, let me broaden that a bit. I'm a supporter of our becoming free of foreign oil. Right now we send about $1 billion a day out of our economy into the economies of other lands. That hurts our economy. It also, in some cases, goes to people who are using it against us, like Putin and Ahmadinejad and Chavez. So we've got to become free of foreign oil. And so I'm in favor of nuclear power, liquefied coal where you sequester the CO2, ethanol, cellulosic ethanol, biodiesel, biofuels, wind power, solar power, all of the above. I want to develop those resources, and I will substantially increase our investment in new technologies so that we can find new ways of providing for energy for our nation. I also want to become more fuel efficient in the use of energy that we have in this country. And I think over a couple of decades, over 20 years, we can be at a point where we are energy independent and energy secure. We got to get that going now. We'll subsidize some technologies. We'll participate in public-private partnerships to encourage the development of technologies. Ultimately, the market will decide which are the best. And we can't predict which will be the very best, but I can tell you that the agricultural communities are going to be growing products. I don't know what they'll exactly look like, but they'll be growing products that will be helping fuel America. It's one of our great resources, our agricultural wealth, and you happen to be sitting in the middle of the wealthiest part of the agricultural world, and that's a great benefit to you and to the nation. So I am very much supportive of our programs to promote ethanol and other programs to promote other technologies, which I think are all going to be needed. I can't tell you which one's going to be the most effective, but I can tell you that we should develop aggressively all of these resources to make sure that we become energy independent. And by the way, that gets us off of foreign oil, and so that helps our foreign policy. It gets us from having to send $1 billion a day out of our country. That helps our economy. And it also reduces our CO2 emissions, our greenhouse gas emissions. So for all those reasons, it's time to get off of foreign oil. Thank you. Yes, sir. Is it Amber? Hi, Amber.
I was wondering what you plan to do to start getting us out of debt, because our government teacher's always talking about how we're $9 trillion in debt, and how it would take at least 70 years to even count to 9 trillion.
How many years? 70? Well, I think it'd probably take longer than that, wouldn't you think? And you'd be hoarse by the time you got finished, too. How do you get out of debt? Well, you stop spending more than you take in. And, you know, we sent Republicans to Washington. We got the House, we got the Senate, we got the White House, and I think a lot of us expected to see dramatic change. Reining in excessive spending, cutting back on earmarks and pork barrel spending, and we got caught in, as a party, the same kind of environment that had been going on for a long time with the Democrats. And that's just simply wrong. We're going to have to change. Change is going to have to begin with us, because you can bet the Democrats aren't going to rein in spending. And so we're the ones that have to do it. And one of the reasons I'm going to go to Washington is to rein in spending and to finally reduce the amount of debt we keep adding year after year after year. Now, the good news is that our economy, if it keeps growing, as it does, that it's able to pay back the obligations of the past with the growth of the economy. Because we take, every year, the revenues of the government rise by like $100 or $200 billion, just because the economy gets bigger and stronger. So we can meet those obligations, and we'll be able to do so if we keep our economy growing strong. The last thing you want to do is to tax the American people more, because that would cause the economy to slow down, and that has a huge impact on our ability to repay those obligations. Perhaps the biggest challenge are our obligations that aren't even in national debt, but they're national IOUs, or promises to the people of our society. And we're going to have to make sure that we reform our entitlements for young folks, 20 and 30 and 40-year-olds, to make sure that we can honor those promises for them, as we do and always will for our seniors. Thank you. Question over here.
From Reynolds.
Hi.
I heard a couple weeks ago on Sunday that America has more people in prison than any other country in the world. Have any answers for that?
Now I wonder about whether we have more in prison than China or India. I don't know what their numbers are. We'd certainly have more than the European nations, just because we're so much larger. We have a lot of people in prison, however, with whatever whatever the figure is comparing to other nations. And how do you reduce the amount of crime in this nation? What do you do? What's the best way to reduce crime? Well, you know, if you have policemen, more policemen, why, it's just going to find the bad guys and put them in prison. So that's not going to empty the prisons. There are a couple things you can do. One is, an enormous amount of crime is committed by people who go to prison, and then when they get out, they go back out and commit more crime. And so one thing is to do a better job of reintegrating people from prison back into society and helping them get out of the life of crime. And that's something we began doing in our state. I think it makes a big difference. But if I had to pick one thing I'd like to see change in this nation that relates to crime and reducing crime long term, it would be this: get more kids, moms, and dads. Bill Cosby, hats off to Bill Cosby, who last weekend said, you know what, we need more moms and dads. He said, you know, in some cities, you can go whole blocks without finding a father. in a whole block of kids. And they're kids that have never seen a wedding ceremony. Never seen a wedding ceremony. And it's an enormous advantage for a child to have a mom and a dad. And you think about all the reasons. One, a mom and a dad are able to pool their incomes, so they're able to care for their child a little better. Number two, you know, when one parent is at their wits' end, the other parent can take over. We've all been there a bit. Number three, the parents can invest in their time and their values in their child. And in my view, most of the social problems of this country can be traced back in large measure to a failure in the home. And so having moms and dads and helping moms and dads learn to be better parents and having, by the way, better schools and also doing a better job with our health care for our kids, all these things at the very early level with moms and dads in school and health care and so forth will create kids that are more, by and large, more balanced and productive and socially responsible. That's ultimately where we have to go. Because somehow thinking that we're going to change a 28-year-old criminal, that's a hard thing to do. We should do our best, but we got to start in the home. And in my view, the future of this country and its promise as a land is driven more by what goes on in the home than anything else. The most important aspect of America's future is what goes on within the four walls of the American home. Thank you.
Governor, we have Craig from Sydney.
Hi, Craig.
Hi. I was curious, are you a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, and will you either strengthen NAFTA or get rid of it?
I'm not a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, and with regards to NAFTA, it underscores the fact that, well, a couple things. One, trade with other countries and opening markets to our goods is a good thing for this country. It's been calculated that the average American family, $9,000 of our income every year comes from, on average, comes from the fact that we can trade with other countries. In the agricultural community, 1 out of 4 acres is planted for markets other than the U.S. So locking off trade with other nations would be a very bad thing for America, and in particular for the agricultural community, because this is one of the places where we are highly competitive. Our agricultural products are the most productively raised in the world. So we don't want to lock off that trade. But we do want to make sure that when we enter into agreements to open up other nations' markets, that these agreements are as beneficial for us, at least, as they are for the other guy. And sometimes we don't do that terribly well. And I will look at NAFTA carefully if I'm president to see if there are ways that we can improve the deal for us. I'll look at, in particular, what the deal is with China. China and we obviously have a trading relationship. It just so happens, however, that they massively benefit by that, and we're not being fairly treated. They peg their currency to ours in such a way that their products receive a very deep discount here. They also do not protect the rights that we have in designs and patents as we would like them to be protected. A lot of what America sells to the world is software, technology, designs, and so forth in our products, and they take those designs and they take those patents and they just duplicate it and don't pay us for them. And so we're going to have to get them to protect what are known as intellectual property rights. Now, I spent my life in business. I haven't spent my life in politics. Only 4 years. 4 years as a governor. My life was in the private sector, first in small business, and then my business grew and became large business. And so I've learned, and I've negotiated and managed businesses and had business relationships in over 20 different countries around the world. And so I know that when an agreement gets signed, I know what kind of impact it's going to have. And it's time to have a president who understands how the private sector works, how jobs come and go. I've seen them both. And I'll work very hard to make sure our agreements are fair and are in our benefit, not just in the other guy's benefit. Thank you for the question.
We have Stan from Shenandoah.
Hi, Stan.
Good morning.
Morning.
You referred to Hillary and Big Brother form of government. Personally, that concerns me too. I even worry a little bit about giving away some of our sovereignty to other nations or peoples of the world, perhaps through the United Nations. I'm concerned about our First Amendment rights, our Second Amendment rights, and where we might fit giving away some of our sovereignty with the United Nations. What do you think our role would be with the United Nations and our First and Second Amendment rights?
Well, certainly I want to protect our First and Second Amendment rights. But number two, I I'm very concerned about the United Nations. I think most people who look at the United Nations say it has failed on a number of dimensions recently. It's failed to stop genocide. It's failed to stop conflict. It's failing right now to stop the Iranians from building a nuclear weapon. It failed to stop the North Koreans from doing so. It's been failing in its mission. Now, and that's concerning. And by the way, there's some parts that fail more than others. One part that fails in a very demonstrable way is the Human Rights Council. And this is a group that comes together to sanction various nations for human rights abuses. And they've sanctioned Israel 9 times. But somehow they haven't found it in their heart to sanction Sudan, or Zimbabwe, or North Korea, or Cuba. It's unbelievable. And so I want to make sure that we withdraw entirely any support for the Human Rights Council of the United Nations. No financial support, no diplomatic support. We're out of there in every way. Now, would I withdraw from the UN? I would not, because I think there needs to be a place where the world can come and talk. But I think we're going to have to form new alliances, new relationships, and one of them I think ought to be a coalition of free nations, where we and European nations and the Japanese and others and Indians and so forth come together to talk about the challenges of the world and work together in a collaborative way. For instance, to help moderate Islamic states reject the extreme within them. I don't think we can just keep on relying on the UN to get the job done, because they haven't been getting the job done. And it's time for us to consider other ways to make sure that the interests of keeping the world free of nuclear proliferation and free of terror through jihadists, these kinds of issues are going to have to be solved by free nations working together. Now, I'm told that I have to stop here, and they took away your microphones. I've got to let you get to work. You've got to earn a living, you know, and the students got to go back to class. But I want to underscore something. Well, 2 things. First, I'm not disappearing on you. That green card, I need your help. I need to make sure that you'll come out and help me. Boy, it's hard to read that green card. You know, the ink is kind of blotchy on there. Boy, I'll attend, it says the first one, I will attend the caucus for Mitt Romney. Will you please sign these and just fill them out and hand them out on the way out? We need to make sure that you guys are going to go to the caucus and vote 5 or 10 times each. And, that's just in my state. I am just kidding, of course, but there was I have to tell you this story. In Boston, I don't know if any of you have been to Boston, but a very common household, or a home in Boston, is what's known as a triple-decker. It's 3 apartments stacked on top of one another. It's a home that has 3 little homes inside of it. And they usually have 3 families and maybe 3 or 4 people each in a triple-decker. Well, the Senate president of Massachusetts was being investigated for voter fraud, because more people voted in his district than there were in his district. All right. So he was being investigated, he said, by the FBI, and they came to him and said, "Now, Mr. President, how is it that the triple-decker across the street from your home voted 326 times?" And he said, "Well, that's very simple. The top floor was still empty." Anyway, vote many times. But fill out that card. Let me describe for you, just in a brief experience, just how important it is for this nation to remain strong. And how, if we're going to change America, we need to change America in a way that strengthens America. And this was a conversation that I overheard from the president of Israel, at the time as Prime Minister of Israel, named Shimon Peres. Shimon Peres was in Boston, and he was speaking with some friends in an apartment, and someone said to him, "What do you think about the conflict in Iraq?" And he said, "You know, before I answer that, I have to put that in context." He said, "America is unique in the history of the world." He said, in the history of the world, whenever there's been conflict, war, the nation that wins takes land from the nation that loses, because land has always been the source of value on the planet. He said, one nation, and this during the last century, laid down hundreds of thousands of lives and took no land. No land from Germany, no land from Japan, no land from Korea. He said, America is unique and in history as a nation that will fight to preserve freedom for itself and its children and grandchildren, and for liberty-loving people around the world. It is essential that we keep America strong. Colin Powell, by the way, added, Colin Powell has said, the only land we took was enough land to bury our dead. This is a unique nation. I want to see strong families. That's the base of our being able to have a strong society and a strong nation and a strong economy to provide the resources we need to pay back our debts and to build a bright future. And number three, a strong military to protect us and preserve our values. I want to thank you for your time this morning. I need your help. I need your help in changing Washington to make sure America remains strong and that we remain, as we have always been, the hope of the earth. Thank you so much.